In this video, we're going to be using Claude Code with Claude Opus 4 to build a less than 1 hour, as far as we can get, clone of one of my favorite products, which is Figma's FigJam. So this is kind of an infinite canvas whiteboard team collaboration type tool. Many of you are already familiar with it, but what we're going to be doing here is, and I'm going to try to limit this to under an hour just to time box this, and we're going to do very minimal cuts, if any, so you can kind of follow along with me as I use Claude Code with the new model, in particular Opus, so that you can kind of see how powerful of a model Opus and what a delight it is to use inside of Claude Code. So we're going to be trying to see how far we can get on some of the core features of FigJam. Just to give everybody proper context here, this is the third of 3 workshops that we did on Takeoff, so I think I'm going to be posting this as well to X and YouTube. So we did a getting started workshop and a planning with Claude Code workshop, just to get kind of some of the basic things out of the way with Claude Code and how to use task management within Claude Code and things like that. So we're kind of assuming you've seen those. If you haven't, if you're not on our Takeoff platform and you haven't seen those, no worries. I'm going to be kind of talking through everything as we go. So the only thing that I have so far is I have just a starter template here so that we don't have to do kind of all the boilerplate stuff to get going. And I just have that hooked up to authentication and a basic database with Supabase. Okay, so I have Clerk hooked up. I have Supabase hooked up so that we can actually do a full stack app properly here with FigJam. This comes from my free repo here called McKay's App Template. This is a very decently popular little starting template that I put out totally for free if you want to just get started with building a modern full stack web app. I'm going to be releasing an update to this repo next week. So I'm recording this on June 5th early. This should hopefully be out by June 10th, the updated one. So if you're somebody who's familiar with this repository and you see some of the updates here, don't worry, those are all coming. So this is going to just be a very basic canvas that we can start from without having to do all the boilerplate there and save us like 15-20 minutes that we can really just focus on Claude Code. Okay, so let's jump right into the project here. Let me close a couple of these tabs that we're not going to need. So the first thing that we're going to want to do inside of our project here is we actually want to run Claude Code. So I'm going to run Claude Code inside of Cursor. Okay, so we're going to primarily be using Claude Code for probably 90% of things here. We may tap into some of the Cursor features with things like Cursor tab for maybe 10%. So first thing that I'm going to do as I open Claude Code is I'm actually just going to pin this. So if you're familiar with Cursor, which many of you are, you access a lot of the Cursor features here in the AI side panel on the right. For the purpose of this video, because it's so Claude Code focused, we're actually going to just be using Claude Code sort of as our AI side panel on the right. And that's kind of how we're going to be interfacing with the Opus 4 model. The first thing that I want to do here is actually make sure that we have Opus selected. So we're going to go ahead and see here, it looks like Opus is already selected. There are 2 models, if for some reason you're not familiar here. There's Sonnet 4, absolutely incredible model, but it's going to be the less powerful of the 2. This is what most people are probably going to be using in their day-to-day workflows because of the cost here. But we're going to be really spoiling ourselves here in using Opus. Again, I just want to really demonstrate in this video how powerful Opus is. This is my favorite agentic coding tool right now. This is kind of what I'm maining. The workflow that you see me use in this video is very reminiscent to what I'm actually using in my day-to-day workflow as I write code. The only difference here is I'm going to maybe slow down just a little bit to kind of talk my way through things. So one of the things that's really important here is we do have a claude.md file. So I will probably be skipping a little bit over some of the basic stuff here with Claude Code, just because I want to kind of keep things rolling and really keep the focus of this video on actually building out kind of the FigJam clone here, as opposed to making it a full Claude workshop. Again, I mentioned those other 2 workshops. If you want to see those, go check this out. We're also going to have a full Claude Code course coming next week. That's going to be really comprehensive. If you're into agentic coding, you might find that valuable. We'll have more on that next week. But Claude Code is very similar to Cursor rules, which many people are familiar with if you use AI coding tools. And this just kind of prepends all of the requests that you give to Claude Code inside of your terminal here with this set of rules. So all you're seeing here is I actually have not touched this outside of just the very, very basic level, which is just some very basic architecture stuff, kind of just some very core project structure about this particular starter repo. But none of this really has to do with anything with our FigJam clone, because obviously I haven't started building anything on that. So that being said, let's actually go ahead and kick this off. The first thing that I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to create a tasks folder with a to-do.md file. So the reason that I'm going to do this is a nice strategy that you can use when you're working with Claude Code to kind of prompt it and to kind of keep it on track. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to update my Claude rules file here, and I'm going to say, let's call this plan, we'll call this standard workflow. Standard workflow. Claude Code's only been out for 2 weeks or so with the new models, and I'm still kind of trying to figure out how I best like to do this. So I kind of try a variation of this every time just to see what works and what doesn't. But one of the things that we're going to do is the very first thing that Claude Code should do anytime it actually works on a task. Okay, so anytime we write a prompt over here and send it off, we actually want it to first kind of think through it and then generate a plan. So we're going to say first, think through the problem, read the code base for relevant files, and write a plan to tasks/todo.md. The plan should have a list of to-do items that you can check off as you complete them. That's good. Before you begin working, check in with me and I will verify the plan. Then begin working on the to-do items, marking them off as complete as you go. Finally, add a review section to the to-do.md file. The summary of the changes you made and other relevant information. Okay, so apologies, we're kind of speaking in list items there. But the reason that we're going to do this will become more obvious as we get working. But basically, just like I have read and write access to this file, so does Claude Code. And so what's going to happen is this file is going to be kind of where I coordinate with Claude Code. And one of the cool things about planning and how Claude Code works is that it's very asynchronous. And because Anthropic's kind of built the functionality to know when a file's changed as Claude Code's working, it will actually alert it like, hey, the to-do.md file has changed. And so if I, remove or add items kind of as it's working, it will continue to work, but know about those changes. So say maybe there's, 2 or 3 to-do items that I'm like, I actually don't need you to do these anymore. Maybe add something else. Claude Code's going to kind of adapt to that in real time without having me stop the process here and continue. And so this is the mechanism that we're going to be using for this. Kind of a lightweight project management system with Claude Code, but should be pretty effective here. So the first thing that we want to do is we're just going to give Claude Code a little bit of context on what we're working on here. One of the tools that I'm going to be using as well throughout, the next 45 minutes or so as we work here is I'm going to be using a tool called Flow Voice. So I'm just going to be basically doing speech to text to kind of increase the bandwidth of, how much information I can give Claude Code at work or at once. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. We are going to start working on a FigJam clone. We basically want to clone some of the basic features of FigJam. We're just kind of having a little bit of a fun with the project here. So what I need you to do is I need you to kind of scope out an MVP for FigJam clone inside of the to-do file here. And then I'll kind of iterate with you a little bit on our plan, and then we'll get working. Okay, so you can see that text-to-speech. I can speak that a lot faster than I can type, which is why I use that tool. Kind of just increases the rate at which you can work here. So what Claude Code is going to do is it's first going to explore the code base structure. Like we said, one of the cool things about Claude Code is you can actually kind of expand its thinking here. If you do Control R here, you can see everything it's looking at, kind of a bit more of a robust way to look into actually what Claude Code is doing, but we just need the summarized version here. So you can see it's going to kind of explore the structure, figure out what it needs to do, and then hopefully what we can kind of do in the to-do file once it writes, which is going to take a little bit of time. One of the downsides to Opus is obviously you're gaining power, but you're sort of trading off speed. Cost isn't the only thing you trade off, it's also speed. So this is going to be a little bit slower, not too slow. It's not, like trudging through mud or anything. Claude Opus 4 is still pretty quick, but it does, it's very thorough. And we're theoretically using a lot of compute here, which is why it's so expensive. So we're going to kind of see what it comes up with. But let's actually just go jump into FigJam and kind of think through some of the things that we want. So we're definitely going to probably want a marker tool. That's pretty essential. Definitely want to be able to put sticky notes, and then there's things like being able to change the color of the stickies, writing onto them, seeing which of your team members actually added the sticky note. There's things like multiplayer collaboration that we'll probably not do just to kind of scope things down. Flowcharts would be kind of cool, right? So if I do like R, I can, drop one of these in with arrows, have like kind of a canvas view here. Every once in a while, we're just going to pop back into Claude Code and just make sure that it's not waiting on us for anything. I'm trying to think, stamps could be fun. There's things, we probably won't do any like AI features. Adding text, probably want to make sure we add text. I think we can get actually quite a bit of work done here with an initial version. Okay, so it looks like it's trying to edit this file here. We're going to give it permission to do so. It's actually just making sure the tasks folder existed, which I had already made for it. It's now writing to the to-do file here. So what we're going to do at the very start is we're just going to kind of help it understand when to or what to work on. One of the things that we're going to be doing as well, we'll say use this workflow when working on a new task. And let's also say periodically make sure to commit when it makes sense. We'll add that. Okay, we want it to create a new file here. Okay, so we want pen, we want sticky notes, flow diagrams, and text, and we'll kind of start with that. Obviously, we do need to make sure you can kind of pan around. This stuff will all need to persist to the database as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a second to review this. It looks like it even broke it down into phases, which is pretty cool. Okay, so core campus infrastructure. One of the things that I'm noticing is we actually don't need it to go to the dashboard route. So I'm actually just going to make a few items here that I want it to edit in the plan here. The clone should live at / we'll just call it /figjam. Okay, individual boards, board ID, that makes sense. Pan functionality, zoom, and zoom UI controls. Okay, that's all core stuff that we need. State management. Don't use a stand for state, just use more generic context. Okay, we don't want to use an outside dependency for state management. Drawing tools. Okay, implement shape tools. Rectangle, circle, line, arrow, sticky note, and selection tool. That looks all good. We want the text functionality. That looks good. Freehand drawing, mentioned we want that. All of these sub items look good. I'm just going to kind of keep things moving. Selection, transformation, multi-select, move selected object, resize with handles, rotate objects, delete selected objects, styling, that all looks good. Data persistence, we of course want data persistence, board management. That's probably good. UI UX polish, I like that. We probably don't need keyboard shortcuts. We'll actually just skip that. All that looks good. We're not going to do collaboration like I said. Technical decisions to make. MVP success criteria. Out of scope for MVP. We'll actually keep this just so it doesn't like go off the rails and write a bunch of random stuff. Okay, now we'll just say, now please update the plan. Also write reminders to yourself to commit. Actually, the model's smart enough to know when it needs to commit, so we won't do that. Okay, so we're just going to let it update the plan one time here. Obviously, we're doing a combination of me updating the to-do file here and a combination of Claude code updating things. So I could have done, everything there. You can see it just updated that. Very nice. But it looks like every single one of these is pretty on the money here. Obviously, if you were scoping out a smaller project, a bigger project, there's a lot of different ways to do this. We're just trying to keep things very cohesive for this one project here. You could do individual task files here. You can do this however you could pull like linear tickets in directly. A bunch of different ways to do this, but this I think makes sense for what we're trying to accomplish here in this particular workshop. So what it's probably going to do is going to update this. It actually added the basic collaboration back, which we don't want. So let me just get rid of that, which is kind of funny. Everything else I think looks good. Yeah, that's good. So what we'll try and do is basically we'll work for like 45 minutes or so and just see how far we can get with this. I'm just going to say I removed the stretch goal stuff. We don't need that. Proceed with the to-dos. Smiley face. Okay, so what's going to happen now is Claude Code is just going to kind of keep working on this thing. And what we're going to do is we're going to be monitoring it as it goes. At any time, we can jump in. We can literally just hit escape, and it's basically going to say, hey, like the user interrupted me. You can see Claude Code actually has a to-do system that it also uses kind of inherently as part of its own tool, which is kind of cool. So it's kind of taking what is in our markdown file here, and it's also sort of keeping track of that inside of its own to-do, right? It's probably prioritizing certain things based on what makes sense to work on chronologically, all that kind of stuff. And what's going to happen is periodically it will ask me for permission to do things like editing files, moving them around, installing new packages, all that kind of stuff. So I can kind of just sit here and we'll sort of babysit it as it works. And what we'll do here is we'll use periodic commits here to kind of save checkpoints into our project here. So one of the things that we should probably do here is we should go to our route here, and we're going to go FigJam just so we can kind of see it. So it looks like it's already starting to almost create some mock data. So one of the things that I like to do as it's working is instead of reviewing all of the code at the very end, you can start to kind of get a little bit of an idea of what it's starting to do as it writes files. So it looks like on this FigJam file, sure enough, here's that mock data we're talking about. You know, the UI here is very basic, but it's very clean, very simple, it's very functional. We can always iterate on that as we go and make that more delightful. Probably won't make that super of a focus here. We really want to focus on just getting the thing working while also looking, passable. Again, this is going to be, 1 hour video or so, so we don't need to go too crazy here. Theoretically, if I click on this, it should hopefully take us to the particular FigJam boards, right? So this is going to have that mocked ID of 1. Of course, it's still building these components out as it's working, so some of these things might not work yet. You can see it needs to work on the build canvas here. So it looks like we got viewport context. It looks like this is the state management system that it's come up with, which is pretty cool. Again, you'll remember in the to-do file here, one of the things it was trying to come up with inside of its own thinking was it was going to use an outside state management library in order to manage its state, right? And this is one of the big advantages of actually asking Claude Code and other agentic coding tools to come up with plans that you verify, so it doesn't just go off on its own and write 15 different files and updates 5 and deletes 3, and then suddenly you're like, wait, I didn't want half of this stuff, right? You can really properly scope the requests to the coding agent, which makes a lot of sense, right? Because if you're actually working with a human on your team, this is the same kind of workflow you would kind of be going about, right? And it turns out when you're starting to work with AGIs, obviously this isn't really an AGI, but maybe an ADI, or for developer intelligence maybe. But it is in fact kind of proceeding to go and do what we asked it to do. Okay, you can see we got some board providers here. This is going to be just kind of something it's using in conjunction with its state management. One of the things that is helpful is you'll notice, despite the fact that I'm not writing the code, again, I am sort of reviewing the code. I'm kind of trying to understand what it's doing as it works, which is really helpful. So one of the things, I'm technically trained, so I am, I'm not just somebody who's like a pure vibe coder in the sense that I've never worked on real software before. I actually have a technical background. So the more you write code, the better you're going to get at just understanding what it's trying to do under the hood. You could even prompt it like in your Claude.md rules. If say you were less technical and you wanted to verify what was going on, right? Like if you're not technical, you may not even know what context is in React, things like that. It might be kind of just something you've never heard of before. You could tell Claude Code in the Claude.md file and be like, hey, as you work on stuff, explain to me what's going on so that I can actually keep up to date, right? And then as Claude Code's working, every once in a while as it starts to work on different tasks, it would kind of jump over to you and be like, hey, here's kind of what I did, here's why I did it, here's what's going on here. And it can actually make it easier to follow. Big reason you want to do that is everybody's kind of experienced the feeling where you're vibe coding and you're just hitting accept all over and over and over again. And suddenly you have this spaghetti code base that you don't really understand. It looks like it's actually trying to run the developer environment. We're just going to say no. We'll handle the testing manually and verify things on our end. Okay, so let's see what's going on. Okay, so this looks pretty good for just an initial version here. So let's see, can we pan around? I suppose we probably want a pan tool. It looks like we can zoom in and out. That's kind of cool. Can we put a square on here? Okay, we can put a square. You'll see I'm dragging this, but there's no like UI. So that's one thing we would want to make sure it can add. It might just have not actually written the code for that yet. You can see I'm like adding lines. Looks like text doesn't work yet. Right, some of the code for this isn't actually going to be worked yet. Okay, it looks like the pen works. Does the eraser work? Okay, it looks like the eraser's not built out yet. What happens if we do a fill on like a circle? Does that work yet? Okay, that works. What if we change the border to be blue? Does that work yet? Blue? Okay, it looks like that doesn't work yet. Okay, so it's working, it's getting there. You can see it's kind of completed phase 1 of the FigJam clone MVP. Okay, so board listing page, individual board view, FigJam/new. Let's actually go try out that new route and see what's going on there here. Okay, so that just creates a new fresh board. Okay, so that's kind of a slick way. I actually want to see the code that's in that page. Okay, so it's just redirecting to the ID page, prepended with this, with the date. That kind of makes sense. It's even writing some to do, so it knows it has to come back and actually handle this in the database, which is great. So we're going to be a little bit lazy on our code review here, but the idea is in a real world workflow, obviously you would pause here, you would review the code, make sure everything looks good. Maybe you iterate once or twice with Claude Code to make sure that, you know, it edits things properly, or maybe it's just good and it can proceed. But in this case, we probably just want to commit. So we're just going to, all right, let's commit this. And then what should hopefully happen here, okay, you can see it's actually just reading the diffs here. It's going to create a new commit for us. You can see git add. We're going to just say yes and don't ask again for git add. We want it to be able to handle git automatically. One of the things that we could do in our Claude rules file here is we could give it more instructions on how we actually like commits, right? That's another way that you can steer this, which is worth mentioning. The new Claude 4 models are super good at actually following instructions. So anything that you add in your claude.md file is actually going to pretty much be followed, which is really cool. Okay, so we can sync that up with our repository here. And we can say, okay, mark down what you did and keep going. So one of the things that Opus can do is it can actually keep working. So one of the reasons why it's pausing is part of how we've defined the standard workflow here, right? We've basically been saying like, hey, you know, periodically make sure to commit when it makes sense to do so. So it's probably going like, okay, anytime we go through phase 1 here, that's probably going to be the time when I want to go check in with the user. And this makes a lot of sense, right? It's obviously really cool when Opus just works for like 45 minutes on its own or whatever. The problem with that is, again, you're going to run into things like spaghetti code and losing track of what your project's actually becoming and things like that. It's just not super practical for real world work. You do need to make sure that you kind of have your eye on what the model's actually doing. You know, the agent, he's like a teammate and you're sort of its manager. So you do need to appropriately manage it. And one of the important things to do with that is obviously breaking tasks down into more smaller modular tasks, which is why we're using this to-do file here. So we can kind of keep track of what's been done. You can see there's some overlap between the two. That's kind of fine, right? Like one of the things you'll notice is like, well, we have some semblance of the rectangle tool already, right? Even though Claude didn't mark it down as complete, that's fine. As long as it has it in its context window and as long as it's kind of being tracked in the to-do file, once it's fully done, it will know to actually mark it as complete, right? One of the things that we noticed when we were using the rectangle was as I dragged, there was no UI for that. So maybe Claude thinks like, hey, this actually isn't completely done yet. I still need to do some additional work on that. And again, when we want to actually add things to the to-do file, we can do that as well. So one of the things that I'm going to add right here, and I can do this without having to stop Claude Code itself, I can just write to this file here. It's going to know that the file was updated. It'll check back in, and it's smart enough to be able to read the difference between the previous version of the file and the new version of the file to know what got added, to kind of know how it needs to change the manner in which it's working. So what I'm going to say is make sure for the drawing tools and the object tools and all that, that when I drag the mouth, when I drag, you can actually see the shape or whatever. This is super great, or whatever being created. Okay, so I'm going to save that so that as Claude continues to work on sort of this phase 2 work here, it'll read that and it will adjust appropriately, right? So we're hoping that as it continues to work here, that when I'm dragging the circle, for example, we see like a preview of that. That would be really nice because the user experience without that is pretty rough. Okay, as you can see, it's saying now let me add a visual feedback while drawing. That's going to be kind of more in the vein of what we're looking for here. You can see because we committed all of our code previously for phase 1, we have a new updated Git tab here with files coming in as things are getting created and edited. So it makes it a little bit easier for us to kind of review the code, right? Everything is going to be much more granular, much more modular, and this is just much more reminiscent of how real world teams, real world developers are actually going to be working on projects in the real world here. So you can see it's adding the sticky note stuff is kind of what it's doing. Editing text, where it looks like we're going to get the features to be able to edit text. You can see again, there's the sticky here. So if we go up, kind of fun to see the code it's writing, right? You can see redraw the canvas whenever state changes. You can see this is the switch statement it's using to know how to actually draw each one of those. You can see we can follow along with the to-dos inside of Claude Code as well, which is pretty cool. So it looks like sticky note tool, text tool, looks like all of that is being added. You can see like it has keyboard shortcuts in its to-do. It might have added that back and I just didn't notice that, shortcuts. So we could just say, we could even just delete this and it will know. Okay, so I deleted that. Should be able to update that intelligently without me needing to go back in there. You can see it checked that the okay, so this is what's getting changed here. Let's go ahead and see what's going on here. Okay, so let's just go to our FigJam boards here. We're just going to click create new board. We should see fresh board. And let's just see what we have. Okay, so we do actually have that preview now, which is really nice. That was essential. Okay, circles work. Line previews work. That's good. Let's see if sticky notes work. Okay, sticky notes work. Double click to edit. Looks like that doesn't quite work yet. I wonder if I used the, okay, so we might have to check in on that later. Text clicking to edit doesn't quite work. Drawing works. I don't think we have an eraser yet, do we? Okay, so we're gonna say we need a few things. Text on sticky notes doesn't work. Text editing on text. Oh, what are the text inputs? Doesn't work. Eraser tool. Was the eraser tool in here? Eraser tool doesn't work. Okay, so we're gonna give it a little bit of feedback here, and it should be smart enough to know what it needs to go in and do here. So obviously everything up to this point is still front end only. We don't have object manipulation, which makes sense, right? That's going to be in phase 3, so I should be able to drag this. But we do kind of want all of these here to work appropriately. I feel like that makes a lot of sense. What happens if I do, let's do green here. Looks like the color selector is maybe broken. So we may have to tell it to fix the fill in stroke values, unless I'm just somehow doing that. One thing too that I want to be able to do is I want to be able to pans. We actually need to make sure that we have pan functionality. So what we're kind of doing at this point is we're just letting Claude Code know what it should probably have done. You can see it updated that to-do file. It even marked that as not working, which is pretty great. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say I need to be able to pan around the board. What else did they say? The fill and stroke color pickers need to work and be applied to their appropriate objects. I think those were the only two things. Okay, so we can have that kind of ready to go and queued up for these next tasks. So let's see. Looks like it staged some of these changes already. One of the great things about Claude, right, is it just keeps working. You can see how, like, I'm very much almost sort of like in flow, despite the fact that I'm kind of recording a video at the same time here. And the point is, like, Claude is, it just very much feels like an agent in the sense that when you give it a task, it just keeps working. It knows what tools to use. It knows how to take your feedback and, kind of keep working on things. You can see theoretically eraser should now work. So let's actually see, does eraser work? We might actually have to just like refresh this. Eraser. Okay, so eraser works if I click. Like if I click on this line, it will delete the line. But we actually want to be able to like erase. Okay, so we actually probably need to specify how we want that done in case we're not quite done. Eraser right now just functions as like an object delete type thing. Let's actually go check out Real FigJam and see how this is handled in here. So if I actually click this tool and go to an eraser, how does it work here? Okay, that's actually how it works in Real FigJam, which is kind of interesting. It just deletes the entire line. I wonder, let's actually try and make it a little bit more advanced here just to throw something interesting at Opus. We'll say that's great for most things, but for drawing tool, it should erase what's in like the circle of the eraser. You guys probably know what I'm talking about on like drawing tools. And we need some visual UI for the eraser as well as we're dragging it. Okay, so let's add those things to the list here. We really want to make sure that kind of gets tackled in this chunk of tools here. And then we'll move on to the object manipulation stuff. And then we'll move on to data persistence, which will be generally is a little bit tricky, especially when you're working with like infinite canvas type stuff. So you can see it updated the to-do.md file with kind of its next set of tasks that I gave it, right? It's almost like we're interfacing with a real world teammate here, kind of handing this off to a developer, and it's just using all the tools it has available to it to go ahead and tackle that functionality. Okay, so let's go back to our app here. I'm also just going to drag FigJam over there. Let's verify that the fill thing worked. That was one thing that wasn't working before. Am I just like crazy here? Why isn't this working? Oh, you know what's interesting? Is it just if I start here? Okay, so that's something to do with the color picker. So that's a bug we'd probably want to report. If we use this UI, it works. So if we make that like red up in this UI, looks like that will save. Okay, so that's it. That's fine for what we're doing right now. Okay, Claude's still working here. What is that? Is that just clear? That's kind of cool. Looks like stickies are always going to be okay. So we do actually have the text for stickies works now. We should also make sure that the text input here works. It looks like our text is red, which I like. It actually looks like text input doesn't work. Okay, a double click makes that work. So that text should say double click to edit. Obviously that UI could look a little bit better. Like if we actually look at how the UI for text is in FigJam, right? It's kind of bordered. You get these nice style items, right? That's probably more of a polished task as long as we get the general idea of kind of the core object, right? First, we'll kind of start with that. And then if we have a little bit of extra time here at the end, we'll work on some of these polish items. Because one of the things that's really important with the AI coding tools is, as many of you know, they can be really good for building out your basic features, but when you start advancing in complexity and product sense and all that kind of stuff, humans tend to be better at that kind of work. A lot of people have famously said like AI really helps speed me up on a lot of the boilerplate, but when it's actually coming to like improving the product and having product sense and all that kind of stuff, it lacks. for me personally, when I use Opus 4, this is kind of the first model where I really start to see it actually excelling at some of that stuff, which is kind of interesting. So we'll definitely make sure we get around to some of that stuff. Okay, so it looks like pan functionality. Okay, so it's telling me to do space plus drag. Space plus drag, okay, that does work. If I hit spacebar, you can see even the cursor itself changes to kind of the hand, which is kind of cool. That's pretty nifty. Don't mind that at all. The zoom works too, that's great. Fill color and stroke pickers, none of blind objects fixed, added transparent toggle. Okay, that was kind of what we just tested there. And then eraser needs visual feedback and path erasing for freehand drawings. Okay, so let's see if it still deletes the object. Okay, I actually can't see my mouse at all when I'm doing this. You guys probably can't tell, but I'm actually like moving my mouse around. So we still need to work a little bit more on this eraser thing before we commit and move on. So we'll just say, I'm gonna use Flowboys again. Okay, so the eraser right now, when I select the tool, my mouse almost like disappears. I don't know what's going on there. I suspect maybe it's like behind the objects or something. But what needs to happen is we should be able to like see our mouse, of course, and then when we hold down and drag, if we go over a standard object, it should just delete that object. But if we go over the drawing tool, it should just delete the part of the drawing that we went over with the eraser, right? And the eraser should have like some set radius of size or whatever. So we need to make sure that all of that works. Right now, it's still a little bit broken. Okay, so we'll really direct the focus of Opus 4 here on that eraser functionality. But pretty impressed so far. I almost wonder if, see, there's my mouse. Okay, so see how if we go off of this toolbar, my cursor's up here on the left if you can't hear. Once we go off of that with the eraser tool, it like disappears. Whereas see if I get the drawing tool and go off, you see the actual drawing. So we need to get it to kind of correct the behavior, right? If I drag this over, we should have like a little circle and then I should be able to drag that. So we'll see what Claude Code comes up with here. So we can even kind of like trace what's going on. So you can see, let me fix the cursor visibility issue first by drawing it in screen space instead of canvas space. Okay, so it's going ahead and tweaking the code here inside of the board canvas file. Again, one of the great things about Claude Code in the IDE integration here, so we just do command click. We can go jump right into that file here. It makes it really easy to go ahead and see what's going on in the files. And one of the things, like you can do file tagging here. You can do a hashtag to create memories in your Claude file here, which is only going to happen like between chat turns, which is why you're not seeing the UI for that right now. So a lot of different stuff. This is a huge file. You can see Claude's written a lot of code, right? There's a lot of stuff going on here. So we can scroll here. We can see, okay, it's implementing partial erase here. In this particular update, it added the eraser cursor as an overlay element, which looks like was the problem with why we were seeing it disappear. It's making the eraser size adjustable in the toolbar, which is kind of nice. That's good user experience. Okay, so we now see a little bit of a circle there. And then if I erase things, it goes over it. You can see it's having a little bit of a type error here. I suspect it's probably because it's in the middle of updating our board canvas, which of course is going to be one of the bulkier components here. That's what this giant 900 liner is. Okay, now it's adding the eraser size control, which we should almost, if we sit here, we might be able to see that live, which is kind of cool. So you can see it's getting pretty close to what we want here. Theoretically, I should be able to make that bigger. Okay, it makes it bigger, makes it smaller. Okay, so that's kind of nice. It would almost be nice to have that stroke or that size tool with the drawing tool. We could worry about that later with polish steps. So that's pretty good. So point is, we pretty much have iterated at this point to get phase 2 done here. You can see it's adding everything with Git here. It's going to create that commit message. We can commit that, save the checkpoint, have all of those phase 2 tasks done. And then we can move on to phase 3, which is going to be all the object manipulation stuff, which is going to be great. Okay, don't ask again for git commit. That's fine. You can do that automatically without my permission. And hopefully it should just edit, or it should just move on to the phase 3 here. Now that we have all that committed, you can see our Git tab is empty here. We have now hit a new checkpoint and we can continue working. So again, in a real world project, when I really need to verify the quality of the code and all that, right? I'm going to kind of take my time to review all the files of what it did. Ideally, I'll probably have some sort of testing set up in my code base, of course, as well. One of the great things about testing is, in the past, testing has been, it's always been important, but it's easier to get around testing. You can kind of justify yourself and be like, well, we're trying to, ship really fast, or we're going to have bad code test coverage of our code base or whatever. When AI can just write the test for you, right? When you can have Claude Code or, one of the OpenAI models or one of the Google models, right? A lot of different models to choose from, right? You can have these models actually write your tests and really speed that process up. So it's, you don't have that crutch of being like, well, we're not going to write tests so that we can ship faster. You can actually write tests with AI super fast. Very important to do, because when AI is editing your code, you'll know if it's doing something it shouldn't if the tests break, right? So you can always kind of have your test suite be another, more concrete way of measuring if the code that the AI wrote was good or not, beyond just kind of you eyeballing the code review, right? So that's, in a production grade project, that's going to be something that you're going to want to focus a little bit more on. So anyways, we're moving on to the phase 3 object manipulation. One of the things that I really want to point out is I know I've completely lost track of time, which probably isn't good. We'll just keep working until this is done, I guess. But we have not written a single line of code. And we already have this, which is pretty great, considering the fact that we're literally just letting an AI model with, a basic markdown to-do list here, and us kind of chatting back and forth with it periodically here. We've gotten this incredible result. And these agents are only going to get better. The models are only going to get faster. They're going to have bigger context windows. They're going to get cheaper. They're going to have better product sense. They're going to be better at writing accurate code. All these kind of things. You're only, this is the worst it's ever going to get. And you can kind of imagine where that means things are headed. You pretty much can build anything that you can conjure up in your head, right? The ceiling has now been raised on what an individual can do, on what a small team can do, what a big team can do, for that matter. So really exciting time to be kind of alive as somebody who likes to work in the world of software. And hopefully eventually, right, these things start affecting not just the digital world and software that we're writing, but also the physical world, making things more efficient. Anyways, we won't make this an AGI rant on how awesome things are going to be. But this is one of those moments as you're using Claude Code with the new Opus 4 model, you really start to feel the AGI. This is one of the things that I really love about working with it. Is not only is it effective, it's also a ton of fun. It's also super exciting, right? It's very thrilling to feel like you're kind of on the precipice here of something really cool. Okay, so let's see what Claude Code has said here. Okay, so we should have drag to move for selected objects. Let's go ahead and verify if that's real. Okay, sure enough, we can move our circle around. Looks like we have to double click maybe. Okay, so that'll work. Can I move this drawing around? I suppose drawing's probably a weird thing to move around, huh? You probably can't even move that around here. Oh wow, Fig Jam, you can. Okay, so maybe we could try that polishing later. What else do we got here? Multi-select. Do we have multi-select here? I'm gonna actually refresh this board really quick. Let's do 3 rectangles here. Let's try and multi-select these. Okay, so we can actually multi-select. There's just not UI for that. Okay, so that's one of the things that we're going to want Claude to do here. Make sure we have some sort of UI indication on multi-select, probably a rectangle of the area or something like that. Okay, that makes sense. Resize objects with handles. Do we have that? Looks like we don't have resize unless there's some weird hotkey way of doing it. Resize needs to work and have proper UI, UX as well. Same with rotate. I didn't see any rotate UI. Can I delete this with the delete key? Okay, that works. That's good. Can I do multi-select delete? How do I select this all the way? Delete. Okay, multi-select delete does work. We just can't kind of see it. And then styling and properties. Stroke width. Do we have stroke width for drawing? We do have stroke width for drawing now. That's great. Okay. Copy and paste. So, okay, can I select that, hit the copy button, paste that? Can I paste? Copy and paste. Seems broken? Question mark. Layering UI doesn't seem to exist? Question mark. Okay, so looks like it actually didn't quite get a lot of these done, which is fine, right? That's what we're in the loop for. That's why we all still have jobs. Okay, so let's go ahead and see how far I got here. One of the things I did want to see was, can I see the rest of that commit message? Semi-transparent fill. Okay, we have theoretically some hotkeys. I actually do want to see if those work. It's like Command A. Okay, select all works. That's pretty cool. Command D looks like, okay, the duplicate item does actually work. So I click this, do Command D. That does delete it. Okay, it looks like it's getting that resize UI, which is pretty cool. It looks like it's working on that right now. Pan mode, escape, deselect all. Okay, that works. Multi-select with command works. That's nice. Okay, so a lot of things is working on here. Let's see what it did. Now let me implement resize handles. Just clean our board up really quick. Okay, so if I click this and resize, looks like resize isn't done yet. It does look we have the visual indicator now for select. It looks like if I drag from right to left, it doesn't work, but if I go left to right, it does. Okay, so that's another polish item. We don't want to make sure it's done, right? Like if we do a circle here, circle here. Also, one of the things I don't like here is if we do the circle, see how this expands to the top left of my cursor? In FigJam, it goes from the bottom right. So it's kind of flipped. So I don't really like that. That's another polish item. I also don't like that you seem to have to select like the entire object here. Like if I even just partially select that circle, it should probably work anyways. Handle dragging. Visual feedback for selection. Shortcuts. Okay, so it's doing a lot of stuff here. You can see you have to scroll down quite a bit to see where it's gotten here. Okay, so it's now doing the resize logic. Okay, so multi-select kind of works. Again, there's a bunch of things here that we want to polish here, which we might do at the end. We could literally just give it a list of polish items in here, right? We could actually add it to this phase 5, which makes a lot of sense here. But we do just want to, okay, so moving works, multi-select works. We want to make sure we get resize, rotate, and the delete stuff works. And then we can kind of move on. Would help if I got rid of the detailed transcript there. Kind of collapse things a little bit. Okay, so we should be able to now click on this. Okay, so resize is like super janky and broken. Like that's just flying around doing whatever. Okay, so we'll make sure we tell it resize is super broken. Okay, let's see if copy and paste works. We'll try that one. Copy, click over here, paste. Okay, so it kind of like duplicates it. Let's see how FigJam's actual. So if I expand my rectangle here, actually, let's keep it like this. And click over here and paste. Okay, so there's actually doesn't paste where your cursor is either. That's probably something I would want. So that's the way we could actually improve FigJam, which is kind of cool. Okay, here's our rotate UI. So it looks like that doesn't work yet, but at least it's there. That resize bug is cracking me up. Okay, so we'll let it kind of continue with where it's at right here, and then we'll do what we did with the phase 2 things, which will kind of continue to iterate and give it a list of things to continue to improve here. Okay. Oh, interesting. Okay, so this is why testing is so important. So see how if I click like the top left one and start trying to resize it, it doesn't work. But if I click this bottom right one, it totally works here. And I'm wondering if the circle's like somewhat similar, or maybe like one of these works. Yeah, the right one works. I'm guessing the left one's not. Okay, circle works. rectangle doesn't. Okay, so that's something I would want to update. I wonder, can we click on a line and rotate a line? It actually looks like we can't even select lines. Okay, so this is like when you're actually working on stuff, one of the things that you really want to do is you want to keep track of what's going on here. Undo redo. We'll actually say skip undo redo. We'll just say let's commit right now. It's done enough work here that I just kind of want to save our progress here. And I actually do want to make sure we get to some of the data persistent stuff, because I do think one of the things that's really important to show is not only can you create a lot of useful front-end stuff, but of course you can handle everything in the full stack. From front-end, back-end, testing, can do everything, and it absolutely excels, which of course is very important to do. So we'll just say, let's move on to data persistence, right? Right now it's working on the Git stuff. It's probably writing a new commit message. Yep, there's that commit message just came in. Proceed, allow it to commit. Oh, we got a weird Husky error. Yeah, some linting errors it's going to fix before it commits. Again, that's one of the really nice things you can do as well in Claude.md is, right, because we have npm run lint listed as a development command, can actually, Claude Code can run the linter, check for any errors that are linter flags, feed those as messages back to Claude Code, and then Claude Code can kind of iterate on those. So linters are another one of those things where it's like, it's a really nice thing to actually have implemented because it helps the AI understand where it has run into issues, right? Like this is why a type system working with TypeScript is so nice, because if you have properly typed thing, you run a type checker, your AI can actually see where the typing is kind of mismatched, and then it can actually go correct its code that way, right? So just gives the AI another vector through which to actually verify and improve its code, which is super, super nice. And we want as many of those things as possible because that's going to help us build really great AI coding tools. And see how it still has implement undo redo here? One of the things I'm going to do here is I'm going to hit escape. You can see interrupted by user, and I'm going to say also skip undo redo. And then hopefully it should update that to-do list so that it doesn't go ahead. Yep. Okay, updated its to-dos here. Now we're moving on to the database schema. Okay, so it's going to go ahead and create the schema. Based on how we have our code base set up, it's going to implement CRUD operations for the board, autosave functionality, and then it looks like it's going to actually continue with some of those things from phase 3 that we didn't quite wrap up, which I'm actually super okay with. I just want to make sure you guys see it actually write some of the database code as well, because that's obviously where a ton of the complexity comes in here. And I want to just show that, hey, Opus 4 can handle this thing fully end to end. Okay, so one of the things you'll see here, it's beginning to update our database schema. You can see it's adding boards, board objects, board collaborators, some relations for that. We're using Drizzle in our code base here. It's actually creating those tables, which is really cool. You can see it's actually going to run our Drizzle kit generate, which generates the SQL file based on the database tables that you see here. So we're going to allow it to do so. This is actually going to create migration files, which is going to be really cool. So you can see we have a SQL file here that corresponds with our database schema. Again, just like I was mentioning type safety a couple minutes ago, another thing that's really nice to use is an ORM, because this adds type safety to your database. And this kind of gives the AI a really nice central source of truth so that it knows what your database schema is. Really convenient way for it to manage it. This is one of the reasons why I put this in this particular template repo, which again, we're going to be releasing that next week with the new version of that. Still, this Drizzle is all in the old one as well. Highly recommend people use Drizzle. Prisma, another great ORM people love as well. Just again, if you can add type safety to your database and give the AI agent a central source of truth for your database, great thing to do, and it helps you get a lot better results. Another thing to mention here is, like, when you're thinking about your tech stack, you want to think in terms of what do the AI agents work really well with, and not just these. It used to be like, okay, what is our team like? And now it's like, well, what is our team like, but also what do the agents like, right? You kind of have to like optimize for different things in this new world. And so it's one of those things that when I talk to a lot of people about like my template repos and stuff, they're like, okay, well, why'd you make these tech stack decisions? Why do you make these design decisions on your code base? A lot of it has to do with we're trying to just like eke out as much performance as possible from these models, which all that stuff probably becomes less important over time the better models get, but doesn't kind of hurt to have like both, you know, better models and a better tech stack. Why not get the best of both worlds? Okay, so you can see it's now going to go ahead and start writing actions files. So these are in Next.js server actions. These are basically just functions that are writing or running server side, right? So this is going to be sort of the equivalent to writing an API route, but just as a function here in TypeScript, which is how I prefer to write, which is really great. You can see we're doing get boards, get board by ID, update board name, delete board, get board objects, save board objects, right? It's doing every single thing that you would need to do manually, but we're not having to write any of the code. We're just kind of managing Claude Code at a high level, really acting like a project manager instead of a developer, right? And so all of these future agentic coding workflows look much more like project management as opposed to, you know, going line by line as a developer. Like this is like 2012 or something and having to do all this from scratch. We don't live in that world anymore. We live in this new world and it's great. So you can see creating a hook called autosave. Let's go ahead and see what that's all about. Again, this is one of the reasons why you run a linter, because see how it's trying to import this use debalance that does not exist in our code base. You can see it's actually literally working on it right now. Now it's asking us for permission to actually install that. It did in fact catch that error, which is great. It's installing that package and boom, that error is now fixed. So that was kind of a really lucky thing that we caught live. This is working. And again, this is one of those things that of course you can set and forget. These agentic coding systems is also kind of fun, also really effective if you're sort of paying attention as well, right? Because you catch things like that, which are pretty cool. Of course, like say we didn't want it to actually install that library, we could say like, hey, we don't want to actually add any more external dependencies beyond what we already have. Write this on your own and it would update the plan. It would go make that change you wanted. You know, and you can do that either via the chat here, or you can do that via updating the to-do file, right? So you have multiple options through which you can kind of interface with Claude Code. So pretty cool. You can see it actually got rid of the mock data. So you remember that page, that FigJam page, it's now instead of using mock data, it's now actually using the get boards. So one of the things that we could do as well is we could even say like, hey, can you generate some seed data with some pre-existing boards, which is actually probably something I'll have it do in just a sec here. So that anytime like we rerun our development server, maybe we have some sort of seed command that we can run to kind of start from a fresh development instance. So anytime, you know, we need to use that inside of our database, it does. So you can see it's actually pushed that migration to our Supabase instance that we have that we're using as our development instance. And of course you can, you know, you could run in Docker like the Supabase CLI and run this locally, but I'm just kind of trying to show you that this is in fact something you can do right directly on Supabase. Obviously Supabase, very popular Postgres provider for a lot of kind of the vibe code community and people like that. I use Supabase in production. I think it's great for everything. So theoretically, we should have object persistence. So I'm actually going to say, also please add like 3 boards of seed data just for testing purposes. And as part of this repo, I have just like a very basic index file here for seed data. So what it's going to do is it's going to go into this data folder, or at least this is what it should do, which of course, because the model's so smart, it will do this, but it's going to add some sort of like boards.ts file here, where it's going to actually seed the data. You can see it's actually going in reverse, which is pretty funny. It's importing something that doesn't exist yet, and then it's going to create the thing that doesn't exist, and it's going to seed the boards with, let's go actually see what was in our schema here. Okay, so we have boards, board objects, board collaborators, which we're not going to worry about collaboration right now. So theoretically, what's going to happen in the seed file is it's going to create 3 boards with a bunch of different board objects that will then be able to load in and go inspect and see and make sure all of our data fetching is working, right? That's kind of the purpose of a seed file, which is kind of cool. I have been yapping nonstop. I need to take a sip of water here. It's actually not water, it's Celsius because we're doing a lot of stuff. Okay, so this is the board's seed file that it created right here. Okay, awesome. It was even smart enough, you'll see it's importing this user ID. I actually have a user ID from our customers table that's as part of this starter repo here. You can see it's asking permission to run the seed command. We're going to allow it to do so. for some reason it runs into an error from running this seed script, it will of course identify what those errors are because the logs get fed back to it and adjust. Looks like it's been added successfully, so we could even go, let's go check our boards. Okay, so it looks like we have 3 boards, a bunch of different objects here. If we go to our app and refresh, we should see that data. So if we click project planning board, it looks like everything flashed and then disappeared. Okay, so we can report that as a bug, right? This is one of the nice things about doing seed data is you can kind of test some of those things. So I'm guessing at some point either our canvas is getting moved or the state management is off or something like that. Looks like we have a back button. So we could of course tell the AI here what we need here. So I'm gonna go back to Flow Voice. So it looks like our seed data made it into the database, but what's happening is when I actually click onto a FigJam board, I see like a flash of the objects and then it like almost immediately disappears. So it looks like we have some sort of bug there that you need to go find. I'm gonna say find and fix. Okay, so we'll see if we can get that little flash bug out of the way. I don't know what was going on there. One of the things too, and as we kind of start getting closer to the end of this, this is really expensive to run, guys. So Opus is not cheap. My guess is we're probably going to be looking at somewhere around $100 for what we've done here, in excess of $100, which for a lot of people is going to be like, yeah, that's like a total non-starter. I can't use this thing. Totally get that. The point of this video is not to convince, the average vibe coder to use this model, but rather like here's at the very frontier of what's possible, which is very relevant to real world teams who are actually trying to use these tools because you need a few things. And the reason I like this FigJam example is because we need to figure out, okay, is this thing actually capable of working on things that are somewhat complex? Can you steer it properly? Can you manage its tasks effectively? And if you do so, what kind of performance are you looking at? How expensive is it going to be? All that kind of stuff. Sonnet, of course, is going to be 5 times cheaper, which for most people is going to be much more tenable. What we're actually going to do, because I think it has state loaded, we're going to exit this. We're going to rerun our dev server here. Okay, so I'm not seeing anything now. We're going to rerun our seed. Okay, interesting. So we can now see that. So it looks like the data just needed to be reseeded, which makes sense. Okay, so meeting notes, development timeline, design system components. You can see all of these are kind of wonky here. But let's actually go ahead and go create a new board. We'll call this test board. We'll click create. Let's make sure that board's getting saved to our database. It is. And then what we want to do is we want to go, right, let's draw like a smiley face. Let's draw a smiley face. And then let's hit refresh and this should persist. Okay, awesome, that persists. Let's do a circle over here. Let's do a, I don't know, let's do like a blue rectangle down here. Let's actually do a red rectangle with blue border over here. Okay, if I refresh that, okay, it looks like there's maybe some sort of erase condition on the saves. So we probably want some sort of like visual indicator of when something's actually getting saved, right? Like let's, we need to select a rectangle, of course. Yellow rectangle here, let's create that. Let's stay here for like a second, refresh. Okay, so that is getting saved. So let's because we're kind of probably getting close to an hour here and I don't want to keep you guys forever. Let me do one more task. We want some sort of visual indicator for when a board is saved. All right, well that's working. Let's just go back and make sure that this does reload. Okay, so that reloads, that's awesome. And while I was working on this last task, let's just talk a little bit about how far we got. So honestly, pretty good, considering, this wasn't like a crazy defined project. We just had this to-do.md file here. Obviously, I would have liked for Claude to update this a little bit more often. That's something I could have just added to my prompt here. Did get a lot of the really core stuff done. Obviously, especially in that phase 2 and phase 3 in particular, there were some of those like buggy behaviors and like edge conditions that we would go in and iterate with Claude Opus for to fix, which you saw me do a little bit of, and obviously it was pretty reliable in getting those bugs fixed. Again, I want to continue to emphasize this. We have not written a single line of code manually this entire time. Every single thing that we've done here is just interacting directly with Claude Code in the terminal by prompting it and using the to-do file here. Okay, so considering the fact that we have not had to actually touch our code base manually once, super impressive. We could iterate. You can see we actually got the saving UI. Let's do a circle here. Saving saved. Okay, that's great. If we refresh that, we should see a circle up there. We do text here. Please save this. Click out of that. All right, so there's like some user experience stuff that we would want fixed. Right, like having to double click some of these things to move them is a little bit annoying. If we, like let's select these two and delete these. Let's make sure deletes are actually persisting. Okay, it says it's saved. Okay, it's saved. Okay, so all of our data persistence is now working. It built the schema design all by itself, implemented all of the actions by itself, right? Like let's go jump out of the actions folder, right? All of the delete, all the CRUD for everything that we need on our database is done, which is really great. Let's just say, okay, update the to-do file, please, and then commit. We're going to stop our session. Right, and we literally could sit here for another hour, get all these like edge case things figured out, right? Maybe we want to move the toolbar from the side down below, kind of like it is an actual FigJam. Like our sticky notes are only yellow. Maybe we want to add the selectors for that. Let's actually see, can we expand sticky notes? Right, you'll remember like this weird dragging bug, right? That's something we would fix. The point is, every single thing that we threw at the model, it was able to do, right? Some of these things had some bugs, that's fine. That's kind of our job in the development workflow where it stands, in June of 2025, right? Is as developers, we're kind of prompting the agentic coding system. It's writing the bulk of code. We're reviewing it, then we're testing things both with, actual testing in our code base and then of course manual user testing to test for bugs and whatnot. This obviously is a very like interactive UI, UX heavy app here. There's just a lot of user interaction going on. It's very interactive, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to do this project in particular. There's just a lot of nuance for Claude to do, and I wanted to show you how powerful Opus is, of course, while also showing you a little bit of its limitations and why you do still need to be in the loop and all that good stuff. So let's just jump back in here really quick. We're going to kind of close everything except for our to-do file in Claude Code itself. We're going to see where it's gone on the to-do list. So you can see it even like marked as backend ready, needs UI. So say like, I'll stop this session of course, but say I came back tomorrow and I wanted to keep iterating. This is giving Claude Code a really nice stopping point from which to come back to. Of course, we could edit this when we start the next session. You can see it's like adding a lot of the review steps. You'll remember if we open up our Claude MD file here, we asked it to do a review section. So you can see it's actually adding some of the summary of the completed features here, right? And so this is really nice because then we could like pick up tomorrow, keep working on our app here while providing Claude Code an accurate kind of summary and a reminder of what it's already done, right? And of course it can search the code base manually and or automatically and figure out what's been done and what's not. But having some sort of file that almost keeps both you and Claude Code on the same page can be very helpful. So on Takeoff, we did our planning with Claude Code workshop, but I wanted to introduce some of those concepts that I was talking about in that workshop here as well so that everybody could kind of see it. So let's let this thing get committed, and then we're going to do the final reveal of the cost, which is going to make a couple people probably fall out of their chair who have never used Opus before, because this thing eats tokens, and its tokens are not cheap. But one of the things, as you're working on these in your actual project, is you're almost benchmarking this against, okay, is this as good as like a developer I could hire, and what's the delta in the cost between the human dev and the AI? And it's not just the cost of the developer, but it's also the speed, right? Because obviously I can do this at any hour of the day whenever I want and things like that. So let's do the final cost reveal. Okay, this actually was cheaper than I thought. This was a 58-minute session, $52.51. You could see some of this. You'll see it. Wait, I thought we were using Opus. Why is Haiku in here? Some of the tools that Claude uses, especially for things like compacting and summary and reading, it will actually use Haiku, which is nice. So Anthropic's built, some of those things that would be overkill for Opus, it kind of does under the hood with Haiku, which is super great. But yeah, that was kind of just a little bit of a mini Fig Jam project in about an hour here, which is kind of cool. So hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully that was interesting. Because Opus tends to be a little bit more expensive, it's less popular to see like videos and stuff of people actually working with that model in kind of a real world workflow. Obviously, part of this workflow too is a little bit explanatory, so you can go a little bit faster. There are ways that you can further optimize your workflow, of course, but I think this kind of got to the point on a lot of things. And we did actually build a pretty decent little Fig Jam MVP, considering we didn't write a line of code ourselves. We worked entirely with Claude Code with Opus 4 in an hour or less. Okay, so hopefully that was helpful. Again, if you are interested, we will have a full Claude Code course on Takeoff next week. Again, the open source repo that I started this project out, we're going to be releasing that as well. That's completely free. That template's obviously open source on GitHub with an MIT license, to do whatever you want. But we have a ton of good stuff coming on Takeoff this month. There are many companies with many announcements that are coming this summer. So we'll have you guys covered. So if you thought that was helpful, again, we have those other 2 Claude Code workshops that we did for introductory stuff and kind of with more of a planning focused slant. For you Takeoff users on here, of course, you'll get all that stuff as normal. And we have some exciting announcements coming with the app itself here, the platform. That's going to be a lot nicer, more content coming with some people joining our content team to kind of increase the rate at which we can get you guys new stuff. Obviously, the more I can put out tutorials and stuff for people, hopefully someone out there finds that helpful. I do think if you do nothing else, definitely check out the starter template. That's going to be open source next week, because that, honestly, I'm like really, really excited to release that, because it's just going to help a lot of you get building faster, especially with how good the AI coding tools are. It's very optimized for these agents and what they're good at. So that was a $52.51 in less than 1 hour Claude Code Opus 4 session. I need to go have some water. My voice is starting to die here. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll be here with more videos all June.